Right, thank you very much, everybody. If you'd like to stand for the local government prayer and the acknowledgement. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of our lands and our recognise.
Mighty God, we ask you to bless this council, agent of change, direct and prosperous deliberations.
We gratefully acknowledge the men and women of the Navy, Army and the Air Force who made the supreme sacrifice in the preservation of Australia's freedom and democracy. We also proclaim our gratitude to those who returned to us.
Thank you. Please be seated. Can I just remind elected members, when you are speaking into your microphone, can you speak really clearly and hold it close to you? There's a few people that have been listening at home recently who've said that they've found it difficult to understand or to hear properly what we're talking about. There are no apologies or leaves of absence, and there are no items lying on the table. So we come to item 5, which is minutes of the previous meeting. And the recommendation is that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 27th of June be confirmed as true and correct. Do I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Hales. Seconded. Thank you, Councillor. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to it? All those in favour? That's carried, thank you. Minutes of the special council meeting on the 5th of July. The recommendation is that those minutes be confirmed as true and accurate. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Hales, and secondly, Councillor Robertson. Do either of you want to speak to those minutes? Does anybody want to speak to those minutes? All those in favour? That's carried, thank you. The minutes of the special council meeting on the 13th of July. Moving Councillor Hales, seconding Councillor Robertson. Either of you want to speak to those? Anybody want to speak to those? All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. We have 2 deputations tonight, and thank you very much to those people that have come to do a deputation. The first one is I'll ask Renee Newman and Ali Bloomfield if they'd like to come up. Perhaps there's another chair. Thank you, Councillor Robertson, if you could get for one of the women. Renee and Ali are speaking on the Fleurieu Marine Education Project. Yeah, if you could do, thank you. And I'll just let you both know that you've got 10 minutes, which includes question time as well. So if you're happy with that, 10 minutes with questions, and please proceed.
Hi everyone, we've just come to say more of a presentation than a deputation today. For some of you who don't know our faces, some of you might recognise myself. I do actually work at the front desk of council, and when the expression of interest went out, I was a casual employee. I'm about to become a 0.5 permanent employee at the front desk, and I'm going to leave it to Renee to speak to the rest of the presentation.
Thank you for your time today. We wanted to give you an idea of what we've been doing. Okay, so obviously we want to be transparent and clear about what we've been
Renee, can I get you to speak into the microphone? Just
Is that better?
Just for the purposes of the people at home, thanks.
I'm just going to wiggle this here. We just wanted to give you an idea, first of all, who we are and what we've been doing. So we've been really busy little beavers behind the back doors doing lots of different things. We wanted to show you what we've been doing, give you a positive impression of what we have been doing to showcase Victor Harbour and the Whale Centre. So this is our new logo. We've named ourselves Fleurieu Marine Education. We've gone with a really significant South Australian icon to really showcase it's not just about whales, but also about what else this Fleurieu has to offer. So Ali and I are both marine biologists, and we're delivering education programs on behalf of the Whale Centre. Thank you for electing us into this position. We have been really busy. So in April 2022, we ran a program here in conjunction with the Victor Harbour Council called Amazing Animals. This was our free launch to the public It was one of our first school holiday programs, and we were sold out within 5 days of it being online. We had about 25 kids and their parents in the room, and this was a sensory lesson which got the kids to touch and feel and explore different animals on the south coast. We had an octopus, an Australian sea lion, southern right whale, and our fairy friends, the penguins. This is the Whaley Spectacular program that was run last week. Ali makes a fantastic whale spouting on the right there. We worked in conjunction with IBRIS to collate with local photographs and IDs of whales that are here on the south coast, so that the kids got accurate, up-to-date information about what was here, promoting where they could go to find whales and really encouraging them that there is still a whale season happening, even though the whale centre is shut. The photograph on the left with the black is actually us pretending to have a whale mouth, and Ali and the kids are crawling through the mouth being different food sources for a whale. So it's really engaging and fun, very professional as well. So last term we had 10 sessions at a childcare centre where we went in and ran beach kindergarten. That included us going to the beach and finding shells, taking kids down there to see different things, bringing the beach to the kids when the weather was poorly, and also bringing the whales to the kids. So the photograph on the right with the 3 hats is a similar exercise where the kids are climbing in and out of a whale mouth being different food sources. So it's really engaging. These were short, sharp presentations, and we would do 5 presentations in one day and then repeat it for 10 weeks. The Winter Whale Festival, we came down. Ali got COVID the day before, so I came down. Let's be clear about that. And we ran a stall, so we had an education stall which had tactile individual content for kids to come and play with. We promoted both the beach and the whales, the whale centre and what lives here on the south coast. We had an educational stall which was basically for kids to come and play. We even brought a part of the beach up there for kids to dig for shells, which is sort of, you can't quite see that in the photograph. There's a blue tub on the ground and they were fossicking for shells. We ran whale spotter programs. So as part of this event, we had 2 20-minute whale spotter presentations in the marquee for individuals to come and watch. We also ran 2 beachcombing events on this same day. So it was a very busy day for me. Ali was home. So we had groups from outside of Victor Harbour. It was a really, really fantastic morning. There was lots and lots of activity at the Winter Whale Festival. And these were families coming down to the beach to look for treasures that exist. And these were kids that didn't normally go to the beach and actually just play. They were dressed like they were going out for dinner. So to get some of these girls down there in their boots and jackets and have them digging in the sand was a really nice experience for us to see, and the families were really engaged with the event. We've just run Park of the Month. So last week, as part of a collaboration with the National Park, we ran a Basham's beachcombing event, and we had 30 families. It was so booked out, we had to open up more seats and more availability. And we had National Parks volunteers and paid employees down to help us with this event. And the sun shone, which was really nice for photographs. It was a really good day. We did have whales come into the bay and a seal. They weren't there for the photographs, unfortunately. And we found some, from crabs right through to lobster heads, sea urchins, and all sorts of goodies. So what have we got coming up? So we're busy. We're both mums, we're both marine biologists, and we're both doing other jobs as well, but we're still trying to do education. We're going to be educating over 300 students as part of Book Week in the library here. The book happens to be about whales, which is really good for us. It's called Walk of the Whales. So in our spare time, we'll be cutting out 300 whale craft over the next couple of weeks. If you find yourselves a little bit bored, I'm sure we can find you some scissors and cardboard to help us out. This will be engaging with local schools, so both private and public schools across the South Coast. So if the library's pretty busy on August 25th, don't blame us. Upcoming, so we've just got approval to be a part of the Nature Festival, the South Australian Nature Festival in October. This is another beachcombing event that we will be running. We're bringing this festival to Victor Harbour. We're trying to make sure they know that we live in a spectacular place with a really amazing natural resources. This is outside of our expectations of the Whale Centre. We want to prove that Victor Harbour is a destination to visit. upcoming, we've been given the rights to run a new program called Australian Sea Lion but Life by a Whisker by the screenplay. They have got an education content which we have been given approval to take to schools. This is really exciting. We've been teamed up with Kangaroo Island, Seal Bay, and sharing resources such as seal pelts and knowledge and photographs. I've actually been across to Kangaroo Island as a part of this partnership to count sea lion pups, look at seal poo, and basically stay out of the seal's way on the beach. So it's pretty exciting. Victor Harbour Childcare, they want us back. The kids really enjoyed the program last year, so we're back for another 15 sessions this term. So that's going to be exposure to all of the kids on 3 different occasions to give them 3 different programs and content. This is really exciting. They really enjoy Beach Kindy. And we've been working with Adair and the Friends of the Hindmarsh River Estuary to create a new program for school groups that are coming here. Obviously, we don't have a space at the moment for our programs to run. So we are thinking outside of the box to create new programs and different ventures where we can use community support and existing businesses to make education work on the South Coast and keep these metropolitan schools coming down to visit us. This is us. This is what we're offering at the moment. We are still going out to schools. We are still doing beachcombing events. We've found 3 other different programs that we can run with resources that don't exist out of the Whale Centre, because the Whale Centre is still a little bit tricky to get stuff out of. So we are busy trying to keep the South Coast as a destination for marine education and metropolitan schools to visit.
Thank you. You've got 2 minutes left.
It's the group booking, so as part of our memorandum of agreement, we need to let you know that we are still trying to do tourism stuff. So we've been really lucky to partner up with one of Granite Island's famous, and I should say well-known, penguin researcher, Stephen Hedges. We've asked him, do you like research? Do you like penguins? Do you like us? Do you want to work with us? And he said yes. So we're really excited to be able to go out to schools and groups and offer that. Future growth. We're really looking forward to the Whale Centre opening so we can branch out to individuals who may not have access to some of the other places available through special education. We are launching programs now and into the future, and we are working with community groups. We've had a really heavy reliance on EBRIS, the Victor Harbour Council and Flinders University Penguin Monitoring Group to get our programs up and running so far. We have an education room that needs setting up. We have a space, we need to get ready, and that's one of our questions. We want to get it ready so we keep these schools coming down. Any questions for us while we're here today?
We can probably take only Councillor Henderson, and your hand up to Councillor Kemp.
Not a question exactly, I just want to say well done. That is really impressive. You've obviously hit the ground running and I'm really impressed.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Kemp.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Thanks, Ali and Renee. One of the interesting things I find how adaptable you are into delivering the program, considering the visitor centre's not available yet. So what can you believe that City of Victor Harbour can do to help you with your program while you're in this interim space? Whether they can find another temporary space for you, or could they develop a website to help you support your activities, those types of things? What else can the city do in the meantime to support what you're doing?
Do you want to go over that one?
Okay, so I guess for us, Ali and I have been working to raise our own capital. So we have do this, and we've been running lots of programs, lots of different spaces to try and build our reputation and make sure we are following through on an MOA and do professional education. As part of that, a website is about $1,000, and we are looking at in-kind or starting to research how we can make that happen. And a big question for us is we need a space, so we're trying to work with cafes to see if we can run programs from there to try and get these schools to come down here again and actually invest in education in Victor Harbour. So it is a bit tricky, and we are trying to look around. We have heard the Penguin Centre is available. We've looked at Independent Anchorage and Causeway Cafe and Nino's to see if they can hold small groups. We're partnering with National Trust, see if they can hold small groups, but we are limited because some of these groups go up to 30 individuals and those spaces can't hold those groups. So we are a little bit dampened in our ability to make an income from this at the moment, but we're still motivated to keep going.
One of the things I suggest that you to the Department of Environment about that penguin centre, given that the lease for Oceanic Victor has just finished. That might mean that the penguin centre might be available. So it'd be worthwhile talking. I'm sure we can give you a name and a contact, Karen, afterwards. One more question, if anyone does. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just following on from Councillor Kemp's question, we entered into a contract with these two women, which was to provide them with the whale centre or space within the whale centre, and also what all of the bits and pieces that came with that. I say it's remarkable what they've achieved without any of that space. I think it's really open on us to make sure that we, for instance, basically a year's, they were given a 2-year contract, which we need to fix that up, because it said when the whale centre was open, which was supposed to be 6 months ago. So it's from the date of signing. We need to add another year at least to that. We need to provide the materials as well as the space for that contract to be fulfilled. Obviously efficient in terms of where it's holding them back from getting out, and it's not in our interest for that situation to be going, because you build up momentum to come to a place that's got operational capability being shown, but they're not able to exercise that because they don't have the space to do it in.
I think when it comes to looking at the end of the contract and renewal of the contract, that's taken into account and discuss with you. But thank you very much for your talk tonight. It's great the work that you're doing and with what you've got. So thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time, everyone.
We also have a deputation in relation to the Victor Harbour Beachside Market dates. Robert and Janet Carwood. If you'd like to come, Robert, and take a seat at the end. You have 10 minutes, Robert, which includes questions from the floor.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Incidentally, the Fleurieu Education Centre, I'm sure we can help them on the foreshore there to raise money and also spread their knowledge. And another thing before I start my deputation, I've noticed that the rubbish bins aren't emptied on a Sunday on the foreshore, and that started about the middle of May. I have actually contacted the Fleurieu people because the officer here said I had to. I've told them about it, nothing's happened. And if you had a look around yesterday and it wasn't a busy day, there was stacks of rubbish bins overflowing. It's not good for the town.
Thank you, Mr. Carwood. If you'd like to start your deputation, if you've got any other issues, you can talk to us about them afterwards.
Thank you very much. The Victor Harbour Beachside Market's been running 35 years, 28 years on the current location in September. And the dates that we have, and you'll see on the back of the flyer, they're the dates we've had, and they've basically stayed the same for most of that time of 35 years. Originally the market was called Country, now it's Beachside. That's only a minor thing. Right, as you can see, the artisan market, if you have a look there, clashes with us on the 28th of August. I have rung the council staff about it, and I was told that Mr. Prisabella was going to ring me back. I am still waiting. That's why I've come to you people. Now, if we run the market on the 28th and the artisan market runs on the same day on Woolland Reserve, we won't be seen with all the roadworks that are going on there at the moment. So I'd like it to be moved that she runs on the Saturday. Also, Regina, who runs that market, did tell me about it, and I asked her to change the date. She was fairly strong, or very strong, saying, no, I'm going to do it. So we're trying to come to an arrangement. And she's asking the stallholders to be there until 6 p.m. on a Sunday night. There's virtually no one around after 4 p.m. on a Sunday, particularly in the wintertime. So I think it would be a waste of time. She's got more chance of doing it on a Saturday. And of course, for the roadworks, we're not seeable from Warland Reserve. My suggestion is either you ask her to change the date or allow the beachside market to also operate on the Warland Reserve. The market, the artisan market, they take between 10 and 20% of our stallholders. So you can see we can lose quite a few stallholders on that day. The other suggestion I've got, because I've no objection to the market in principle, I think it's a good idea. I think if they ran on the first and third Sundays of the month, it then helps the public know that there's a market always in Victor Harbor, because on the Saturday you've got the farmers market, then on the Sunday you've either got the artisan market or the beachside market. And if there's 5 Sundays, then we can change, alternate. So one week it's us, 1/5 Sunday, and the next one it can be them. We do clash on October the 2nd. I'm happy, if need be, that we don't operate on the 2nd, that's a Sunday, but operate on the Monday the 3rd. I'm happy for that, because that is the first Sunday. And then when it comes to January, we can do what Goolwa does. The Rotary Club runs all the markets on the Sunday in January, and then the rest of the year, the Chitterslow market runs on the second and fourth Sundays. Sorry, that would work quite well. That's basically all I can say, and hopefully I get you to, as a group, manage to change what's happening and currently, i.e. stopping the clash on the 28th of August.
Thank you, Robert. I will ask Mark Priscilla to give you a ring and to go through with you what your suggestions are and what we may or may not be able to do. Does anybody have any further questions? Councillor Glasbrook?
Yes, thank you. Can I just clarify, did you suggest that combining the markets would be, on those clash days, would be advantageous to yourself, or?
Well, it could be way, and then everyone gets a fair go, yes.
Seems to make a bit of sense to me.
Yeah. So in other words, we also operate on Warland Reserve. Because at the moment, with all the roadworks, drainage works that are going on, we can't be seen from Warland Reserve. I'm actually surprised that we're still getting customers. But then a lot of advertising's gone out, day on the day as well. That's helped. So, and like when they had the Fringe in March, that did take a lot of, well, we basically, once they started doing entertainment on the Warland Reserve, we had no trade. So they do, it really does affect us. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Kemp?
Yeah, thanks again for your deputation. The optimum process would be for you to operate separately.
Sorry?
It'd be the best option for you to operate separately, not together. Prefer to have it separately. So either someone has to change the date or change the venue. So I guess that's something for council need to address, because if this has already been locked in by your organisation, I'm just wondering how council have come along and picked up those dates without realising it. So yeah, we'll have to wait for council to respond back to you, but you prefer to have a separated process. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? No, thank you very much, Robert. Much appreciated. And Mark Priscilla will get back to you.
Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you. Okay, so now we come to questions from the gallery. Tim Mitchell, you had some questions which came in.
Yes, I submitted two written questions on the in trial overnight use RV park at Investigator Bay car park.
So would you like to read your questions, or would you like me to read them?
I haven't got a written copy, could you please?
So the first question that you asked, if you're happy for me to read that out. Yep. How many times did the City of Victor Harbor Council compliance officers or contracted security patrol guards make patrols of the trial overnight car park at Investigator Bay car park, commonly called the Dump Beach car park, during the trial to ensure users were compliant about non-compliant use? You want to answer that, Graham?
Yeah, through the Mayor, a total of 28 inspections were carried out by council compliance officers during the recreational vehicle trial period from January through to March 2021.
Thank you. The second question was, has the City of Victor Harbor Council reviewed security and compliance of use measures it implemented for the trial overnight car park at Investor Bay car park? If it has conducted such a review, what conclusions and or recommendations were made and or implemented?
Through the Mayor, no review was conducted following the trial because the trial was finished early as a result of a council resolution to revoke the decision it made in December in 2020 to conduct the trial. And that decision, I'll read the decision that council made initially, which was then revoked. That council endorsed a trial for a period of 6 months for the following designated area and conditions for self-contained RV overnight camping, and a report be provided back to the council on the trial at completion, and the site being the Dump Beach car park. So that was the actual resolution that was revoked on the 22nd of March 2021. So with the revocation of that resolution, no further work was done on that matter whatsoever, including the review.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. And then the second part of that question, if it has conducted a review, well, sorry, that's redundant because the review wasn't conducted.
Thank you. Does that answer your questions, Tim?
Well, yes, partially. I'm curious as to why the trial failed, and I think one of the significant factors in that was non-compliant use.
I think there was a number of complaints from the neighbouring the residents and
about non-compliant use. So people camping in tents and things like that. So I think that should have been anticipated, but I had no information. So I didn't know whether compliance officers or security patrol guards had been visiting it during the trial period. So that's why I asked the question.
Thank you. They were.
Rather than jump to a conclusion that it hadn't been effective.
Thank you.
But I think because it failed, because residents complained about non-compliant use, I think that question perhaps remains. Anyway, thank you for your time.
I have a question. Is it right to say that the trial failed? Did we not, as a chamber, decide to stop the trial midway through it rather than the trial failed? That was my question through the chair.
It wasn't a failure. We had a trial. There was no failure or success of the trial. There was a trial stopped. Thank you. The other question from the gallery is from Team Victor, Mr. Charles. And the questions, Mr. Charles isn't here, but for the elected members, the questions pertain to what elected members entered the council chambers at the specific door that they came through. What door did they use? I note that Team Victor was surveying staff and elected members arriving and exiting through what they call the staff door into the Civic Centre, and I presume they mean the door leading into the little car park here on the left as opposed to the main car park, and questioned why some elected members used that door, the specific times that elected members arrived and exited the building, and asked why they used that door to come and go as opposed to using the main sliding doors, and what authority they had to use that particular door. I refused those questions. They don't relate to council business, and I consider them being irrelevant and trivial. And for that reason, they weren't allowed. But if Mr. Charles wants to come and talk to me about what doors elected members come and go from, I'm more than happy to speak to him if he wants to give me a ring. There are no petitions, and we now come to item 9.1, outstanding resolutions. The recommendation being that council receive and note the outstanding resolutions report. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson, thank you. And Councillor Kemp seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp or Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question to the acting CEO. We have 37 outstanding resolutions on our books. Just wondering what what plans are in place to reduce them down. Seem to be not reducing too much, if you understand where I'm coming from. So I'm just wondering, is there a plan in place to reduce those resolutions? Because we seem to be adding to them.
Thank you for your question. Through the Mayor, many plans to reduce them depending on the item. Some of the items in particular, we're waiting on information back from other agencies, and whilst we have followed those agencies up, we're still yet to receive a response. And so until we get closure on some of those matters, they do stay on there, and that's part of our process to make sure that nothing does fall by the wayside. But I can give you my assurance that we are working diligently through them and trying to see them through to a timely resolution.
Are there any questions or discussion in relation to the outstanding resolutions report? If there are none, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried. 9.2 is the 2022 Local Government Finance Authority Annual General Meeting. I can take the first two recommendations on block: to receive and note it, and to appoint myself as a voting delegate and the Deputy Mayor as proxy delegate. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Schofield. And Councillor Henderson seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anyone want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. The recommendation 3, if someone would like to move either 3A or 3B. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. I'll move 3A, that council declines the invitation to submit a notice of motion to the Local Government Finance Authority Annual General Meeting. Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp. I guess the only aspect of the reason why I was doing that is because we don't have one in front of us in the way of a motion, so it's a bit hard to submit one. So I guess, you know, at this stage I can't see or why we want to submit any at this stage. So that's why I support this motion. Yeah, thank you. I think I'm pretty sure that Kyla, the governance officer, sent through a query if anybody had anything they wanted to bring up, and I don't think there was anything. So I'll put Councillor Robertson. You want to speak to that?
Well, no, it was more of a question, Mayor. I noticed in this item that the nominations closed on the 19th of August for the members of the board of the Finance Authority. How long do those members serve? Is it annual, 1 year or longer?
I'm not sure offhand. Kelly, do you know the answer to that one?
The reason for asking the question was I thought it really curious, and it comes up again later in the agenda, that that these bodies are calling for nominations to their board at a time when councils, the councils in South Australia are being wound up. There'll be new councils in just a few months' time.
Yep.
And it seemed funny to me that you would be that it would be done now and rather than waiting until the new year.
Yep. No, it's actually 2 years. Councillor Robertson, if you look at page 22, it's got that in there on right down the bottom. You're quite right in terms of the voting. They were looking for somebody, the president for the LGA, which is nominated at the next LGA annual meeting, which is in November, prior to the election. And if the person who gets in is not re-elected, then they have to hold another election. So it does seem a little bit strange.
Yeah, maybe worthwhile if you're going, or if Councillor Hales is going to the meeting, to say to them that the processes that they're involving themselves in on the cycle, because if they're doing it this year, then every 2 years, then they're repeating themselves at the end of the next council. So why not shift that process round so that they have a more logical approach to getting a stable board in place?
Thank you. Any further comments? If not, I will put that, and we're looking at recommendation 3A to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 9.3, the Behavioural Management Framework and Draft Policies. Have I missed one? All right. Okay. The 9.3, the first recommendation is that Council receive and note the policies report. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Littley, seconded by Councillor Schofield. Any discussion on that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. And if somebody would like to move either recommendation 2A or 2B, Councillor Henderson.
I'd like to move 2A, thank you.
Recommendation 2A, and do I have a seconder for that? Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Henderson?
I'll need to say I think the administration staff, in particular Carla, has done a good job on this.
Thank you. Councillor Littley, does anybody want to speak to this? In that case, all those in favour and those against? That's carried. Thank you. 9.4 is the elected members' records policy, and the first recommendation is that Council receive and note this. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Hales, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to this? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. The second recommendation is that Council adopt the reviewed elected members' record management policy at attachment A. Moving that way, Councillor. Seconding that, Councillor Schofield. You want to speak to that, Councillor Littley? Councillor Schofield? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. On page 79 of the agenda, 6.6 mail opening. I've spoken to this before, last time we reviewed this. It's got in here that the staff or from the records officer can open up private and confidential mail, for the records. I believe that is contrary to the Commonwealth law on private and confidential mail to be opened by someone who's not addressed to. I do see where the councils come from, what they're trying to recapture and all that, but in the actual elected members' records management policy, it puts the onus on each elected member that if they receive any information relating to council business, they should report it and get it recorded. But if you receive something which is personal and private and confidential, which has nothing to do with council, for whatever reason it's come to this building, should be left closed until the elected member looks at it. And if it is a council issue, then put it for recording. I think we should be able to have a system here, which, we are elected members by the community, where we should have that ability to make that decision, whether it's council or not. and maintain our private and confidential business for whatever reason why that mail may come here. I can't determine why it would, but it can. So I just believe that that statement in there is incorrect and should be removed, so that I won't be supporting it as it stands.
Thank you. Any further discussion? You'll be closing the debate if you speak, Councillor Little. Anything else? Councillor Mann?
I'll just say quickly that I'm not getting any of my online shopping delivered at council, so that I guess doesn't apply in terms of that argument, David, around who would be getting personal stuff delivered to council. But yeah, I think the policy is fine.
Thank you. Councillor Little, if you want to close the debate.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to Councillor Mann there, that I don't see any problem with the 6.6 mail opening. I think that's been the standard across my time here on council, and I don't, I've never had an issue with that, and I don't think there's been an express issue of that at all from any councillor member from my recollection. So I think it's quite appropriate to be in there as it stands.
Thank you. That closes the debate. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried. Thank you.
Call a division, please.
Certainly. All those in favour, please stand. We'll just wait for Karina to catch up. Okay, for Councillor Hales and Councillor Mann, Councillor Schofield, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Little. Against, Councillor Glasbrook, Councillor Robertson and Councillor Kemp. That motion's carried. We now move to 9.5, the 2022 Local Government Association AGM, call for proposed items of business and voting delegates. The first recommendation is that Council receive and note the call for proposed items report. Someone like to move that way? Councillor Robertson. And seconding that, Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Does anybody want to speak to that? In that case, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? The second recommendation has 4 proposed items of business to be included in that. The minimum voting age for local government elections, energy positive and carbon neutral development, installation of new enterprise resource software and landscape board levies. I'll put that recommendation to the floor. It's one recommendation, but if you want to talk about we could do that. We could probably, that's all on recommendation 2. But if you want to exclude any of them, do you want to exclude any of them, Councillor Robertson? No? Does anybody want to exclude any of them? No. So if you're including, you want to exclude one?
I'm not sure about excluding. Well, I wonder about the voting age, to be honest, of 16. I personally wonder whether that's a little bit young. I think there'll be a lot of 16-year-olds who would be influenced, could potentially be influenced by their families. You know, who do you think I should vote for? Dad, this sort of thing. I'm not sure that a lot of 16-year-olds are going to be horribly interested, is my opinion, as where that influence could come. So I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. It's not a big deal, but I think 18's fine, but personally.
Yep. So you're suggesting I don't think you can do that with the way the recommendation is written, and if no one wants to take any of them out, then we'd move recommendation 2, which incorporates those 1, 2, 3, 4. You're happy to do that? Councillor Henderson moving that way, and do I have a seconder for that? Moving the whole thing. Councillor Hales, seconding that. Is there any discussion? No, Councillor Hales. Councillor Robertson?
Yeah, Mayor. I mean, I'm really wondering what you're getting at here. I personally have an interest in this because I put a lot of effort in. 3 of these are mine. And 1 is from Councillor Hales.
And they've all just been moved.
Yeah,
We've moved
one
them all.
en bloc.
Yeah, and would you like to discuss any of them?
I said that before. Yeah.
Well, this is what I'm just. Councillor Robertson, they have been moved en bloc and seconded, and now it's open for discussion on any one of those items, any one of those points that are in there. Nobody wanted to take them out. People wanted them all in there, so they've all been moved, and now you can discuss whichever ones you want. It's absolutely open for discussion. So you've got your hand up. What would you like to discuss?
Well, I'd like to go through them one by one.
You can do that.
You're going to the LGA as the voting member for this council. So you're going to get some questions about these.
Councillor Robertson, this isn't a debate against me. This is a debate in relation to the recommendation. What would you like? The recommendation is up for discussion amongst the members. You can discuss whichever part of it you want to, or all of it. You have 5 minutes. Please.
Yep. Well, I'd like to start with the first one, which is the voting age one.
Absolutely. Have you got any questions, or what would you like to discuss?
No, I'd like to put forward, I've written up at the back here, I hope the members have read the submission made, because that's the one going through to first of all to the SAROC, and then to the, hopefully it'll be passed by the SAROC and go through to the LGA meeting. But in essence, there's a movement afoot for internationally as well as within Australia to lower the voting age bit by bit. Reminds me of not so long ago, we thought it was okay to lower the voting age from 21 to 18 and the world didn't fall apart. But I guess the thrust of my interest in this is that yeah, we talk a lot about youth development and so on and getting people involved. Well, lowering the voting age is a great way to get youth, at least at 16 years of age, involved in at least local government elections. And after all, at 16 years of age, youth are able to join the army and kill people. They're able to drive a car and kill people with them. They're able to, it's the age of consent. So to me, lots of 16-year-olds are also well and truly, especially the males, are at work, having left school. And so they deserve to be, have a say in their future. So to me, it's a very logical thing to do that we put this proposal forward. It is a divisive issue, so you'll receive when you get to the council, a lot of people will be saying, you know, what was the Victor Harbor Council thinking? That 16-year-olds can't possibly be trusted to vote. But you know, we're and I don't expect that it gets passed to the SAROC maybe, or maybe they'll get brave and put it up to the LGA, but it's coming up from other directions in society, so, and it won't pass, I know that, but I mean, it raises the issue, puts it out there, and then, okay, if you're into youth development, then you might think about supporting that.
Is there anything further you want to say around the recommendation? You've got 5 minutes for that recommendation, Councillor Robertson. If you want more than 5 minutes, you need to ask the meeting if we can go out of meeting procedure. or give you extra time. What's the time? You've got 2 minutes to go. Councillor Robertson, I've asked if you want, we've got 5 minutes to speak to a recommendation. I've put the recommendation and I've said to you, if you require more time, you can ask the elected members if they'd be happy to go out of meeting procedure or to give you more time. I'm giving you all the time that you need to talk to whatever you want to talk to. Well, you've already had your 5 minutes now. Is the rest, are you happy for Councillor Robertson to have another 5 minutes? There you are. Thank you. You've got 5 minutes, Councillor Robertson.
The second one is the energy positive and carbon neutral development. And this was following on from and directly coming from what Director Pathouse was talking about in terms of the new planning and Infrastructure Development Act of 2016 is an entirely adequate document when it comes to councils who are planning to deal with energy positive and carbon neutral development in their, even at the household level. The minimum structures that are required to meet the requirements in the Act are totally unsuitable for planning purposes. So I think it's a really important issue, and I thank Director Pathouse for allowing me to use that as to put it forward. The third one is the installation of the new enterprise resource software. Lots of councils in South Australia are going through the process that we're going through now of installing new enterprise resource software. It's an extremely complex development project. They cost a lot of money. They soak up an enormous amount of time and energy out of the staffing situation. And it's okay for councils that are close to Adelaide, they can get technical assistance and so on, but particularly at the Sarrock situation, where you move away into regional areas, all of the technical assistance is so much harder to get, is so much scarcer even in some of the larger cities that Mount Gambier, etc., that are in South Australia. So to me, it's the LGA thinking heavily about a situation that's coming at them through the individual councils with the old software, the Synergy Soft, which was successfully installed in round about 2/3 of the South Australian councils. It's a dying beast, and so I expect that in the next over the next year or two that many councils are going to face a lot of difficulties in terms of managing the implementation, and that the LGA would be well advised to set up at least some honest brokerage arrangements whereby those councils that are in more remote areas and rural areas of South Australia have access to some help in that process. That's it.
Thank you. Is there any further debate or any other questions? Councillor Litterly.
Yeah, after that, I'd like to make a comment. Now, I'm not sure where Councillor Robertson is drawing his impression of 16-year-olds of today, but from someone who's a little bit closer to the source of knowledge on that front, what I can say is take on today's teenagers is a very blunt, somewhat offensive, one-size-fits-all look at it. I too think that an appropriate thing would be to lower the age and introduce the concept, at least, of lowering the age of voting at our local government elections. So I don't agree with Councillor Glasbrook on that. I do think that our 16-year-olds today are quite educated and looking at a a way to influence their local communities on a growing, there's a growing desire for that, and I'm sure some of my councillor colleagues have witnessed that, looking across the table at them. But yeah, I think that it would be a great concept to introduce, and maybe our teenagers won't be looked at as people driving killing machines and able to go to war, and that's the only thing they're interested in, those sorts of things. But I'm pretty happy with those recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Councillor Hales, I know that one of the recommendations came from you. Did you want to speak to that?
If I may, I did note that we did move very quick at the start there onto Councillor Robertson. I did second the motion.
I beg your pardon.
So I would like to speak to
Yes.
it, but only if everyone's okay with that.
That's
Beautiful. Yeah, no, my motion was coming off the back of our budget meeting a couple of weeks ago, the Landscape Board levy. It's a very simple motion telling the state government to please collect their own taxes rather than use local government as the middleman. I hold similar scepticism to Councillor Robertson into terms of probably a state government response to this motion, but I do think that it is something that most councils would absolutely agree with. No one wants to be the middleman in tax collection, and if the state government wants to use the money their way, they should bring it in themselves. I totally also support Councillor Robertson on the second one, the energy positive carbon neutral development. I think I've said many times in this chamber over the last 8 years almost that the state government has continued to erode councils' controls over planning and development in local areas, and it's a great pity because it does centralise these controls and move them away from where people that are actually affected by them are. And so any reversal of that is a good thing.
Thank you, Councillor Hales, and I do apologise for not asking you to speak first. Second. Is there any further discussion on any of those recommendations that are going? No. Councillor Henderson, do you want to close the debate? No. In that case, I'll put that to the floor. Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The third recommendation is that Council appoints myself as the voting delegate and Deputy Mayor Hales as a proxy delegate at the Local Government Association AGM. Someone like to move that way, please? Councillor Henderson. And seconded by Councillor Robertson. Either of you want to speak to that? Anyone want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. We now come to 9.6, the CEO Performance Review Committee member vacancy. The first recommendation is that Council receive and note the Performance Review Committee member vacancy report. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And seconded by Councillor Hales. Either of you want to speak to that report? Anyone want to speak to that report? Councillor Kemp.
Just a question, thank you, Mayor Jenkins, and since you're the chair of the CEO's Performance Review, considering that most of the CEO's Performance Review meetings are being cancelled for this rest of this year till November, would we be meeting? Is it worthwhile putting another person in place if we're not going to meet?
I think we've got one meeting. I had that discussion with the acting CEO this afternoon, and I think we have got one meeting before the end of our term. The difficulty is if someone is an apology for that, we won't have a quorum. So we really need one person to cover that one meeting that we have. If there's no more discussion about that first recommendation, I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. And so in accordance with the appointment of positions and the code of what I'll do is I'll call for suspension and meeting procedures.
Excuse me, Mayor Jenkins, do we need to do that unless we get 2 applicants?
No, if we've only got one applicant, then we don't need to do that.
Had only identified Councillor Robertson as interested in the position, so I'm happy to nominate Councillor Robertson. If there's more nominations, then we might need to go out of procedures? Yeah.
Sure. So we've got Councillor Robertson. Are there any further nominations? No.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Schofield.
So we have 2 nominations. And so what I'll do is that if we can move to appoint the Acting Chief Executive Officer as returning officer, then she will conduct a ballot for that. So can I have a recommendation in relation to that? It's moved by Councillor Littley and seconded by Councillor Henderson. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. So while they're discussing the ballot process, I might ask Councillor Robertson and Councillor Schofield just to speak for 2 minutes on their nomination. Councillor Robertson, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm expressed my interest at the 28th of June meeting. I enjoy this sort of work, and I've done a lot of it in the past. And so, yeah, it's something that I hadn't been on this particular committee during the life of the council, so expressed an interest in joining it at this particular time.
Thank you. Councillor Schofield, did you want to speak to your nomination?
Is that on?
Yep.
Yes, it is on. Thank you. This is something that does interest me. I have been involved in this sort of review in previous life, and I'd like to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just ask Karina to distribute votes. But first, thank you, Karina. I'll ask, are there any further nominations? Then Karina will distribute the votes. So 1 name on the paper, as there's only 2 nominees. If there's no clear winner, we'll draw lots, but ideally first past the post.
Thank you.
So the name that goes into item 3 is Councillor Schofield.
So recommendation 3 is that council appoints Councillor Schofield to the CEO Performance Review Committee. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson. And seconded, Councillor Hales. All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Schofield, for your one meeting. The item 9.7 is Regional Development Australia, proposed regional agriculture industry support role. The first recommendation is that we receive and note the report. Someone would like to move that way, Councillor Henderson. And seconding that, Councillor Hales, thank you. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Does anybody want to speak to receiving and noting the report?
I find this quite interesting, and it's not that I don't support the agricultural industry, but I'm just wondering, I'd like a little bit more information on the proposal, the objectives that the RDA are looking for, because when I look at the agricultural industry at the moment, there's an advisory board of agriculture which is statewide that covers every agricultural industry, that works very closely with government and meets on a very regular basis, a monthly basis, with the relevant ministers. We have the Agricultural Bureau, which within this area there are 5 active bureaus. The farm, or what was the Farmers Federation, then each organisation has their own development boards, like the Dairy Industry Development Board. We have wheat, and I could go on. So at the moment, we would have about 20 or 30 odd groups that are working for and representing the agricultural industry in South Australia. And I'm wondering, are they reinventing the wheel by looking at, I don't know how many councils are going to support this with the 20,000? Are we all the same amount of money, or is it different? I would have thought it may have been more beneficial before they set up something else, is to call all of those organisations together and have a look at the industry as a whole across South Australia, which we should be looking at, and working out where their support is needed. I mean, there's so many things happening at the moment, and one is the foot and mouth that is yeah, absolutely diabolical if that gets here. And I would say that if this is part of the role of what the Development Board is looking at, because it's come up rather quickly, then I would say that the dairy industry and the meat and livestock, those boards would be working on it now. They'd be 5 or 6 steps ahead of anything that we could support at the moment. So I'm not saying I'll reluctantly vote for it, because I support the agricultural industry 100%, but I question why, and I question the amount. And really, if we say put 100,000 in from 5 councils, it's not going to go anywhere. It's one person's wage. And I would have thought again, and I'll say again, that bringing all the boards together, the advisory boards, the Ag Bureau, the Department of Ag, bring them in, have a discussion, and then move forward would be the way that I would look at this.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor, I won't be voting for this. I think this is it's really a pretty hopeless proposal. I mean, you just take a look on page 97 at what they want one person to do, to provide solutions and triage industry needs across all the different industries that have been outlined by Councillor Schofield, as well as working one-on-one with producers on significant issues, and then encouraging networking and collaboration, and lastly, providing a single regional voice and on behalf of council partners. I mean, even Superman or Superwoman would be battling to do even one of those things. I think this is just a chance to add some staff to do to the RDA, but it won't help anything that we're doing here at the local level. We have a agribusiness reference group, which is working well locally, and we have a lot of local groups that are defined like Flurio Beef Group, dealing with the beef industry, and I think RDA is just this here is I don't want to say ridiculous. That's not a nice word, but I mean this is just this just doesn't work at all, given what they've said they're going to do on page 97, which is mission impossible. So to me, I think that there's got to be a better way to skin the cat.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. I've got a couple of questions myself. You may be able to answer, Karen. How much do we provide to the RDA on a yearly basis? For Kelly, do you know the answer to that? No, or I'll take that on notice if you could let us know, because I know that we contribute to the RDA and that contribution tends to go up every year. I couldn't, no, that existing budget line is wanting this, is this. Oh, I beg your pardon. So, okay, that's the Southern and Hills LGA membership. So how much our membership is, I'm not quite sure for the RDA. That wasn't clear to me in the report. It's more than that. So I'd like to know how much we're actually giving to the Regional Development Australia, and there hasn't. I'm also concerned about the lack of detail in there's no business plan in relation to this in the report as well. And I know that whenever we're asked for money, we ask for a breakdown of a business plan. The letter's quite vague. Does anybody, you want to, sorry, Brian, didn't realise you wanted to speak to that as well.
Yeah, as Councillor Schofield and Robertson both said, looking at that list of things that this one role, their responsibilities would achieve, it's not possible to achieve those 6 dot points. In fact, I would sit there and break it down that if you could achieve to the level that we'd expect if we're putting money into a role like this, if you could achieve one of those objectives or responsibilities in your time, you're doing pretty well if you did it right. So I won't be supporting this because I don't see there's value for money there. I don't see that there's, I think a different approach and it needs to be thought through a bit more, and have some faith in our industry representative groups and the way we're already doing it from a local government perspective, for them to move in the right direction for that, but I won't support this.
Just for your information, from the budget that's just been passed, we've budgeted $39,400 to Regional Development Australia for the next financial year. That's not counting this money that they're after. Is there any further discussion in relation to recommendation 1? Councillor Kemp.
Mayor, we're only talking to the report, really.
We're only talking to the report, yep.
Yeah.
Yep, we're only talking to the report. Councillor Kemp?
I'll wait till the second, if it gets up.
The second one, okay. Is there any further discussion in relation to the report? No, in that case then I put recommendation 1 to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? The second
Yeah, Jenkins,
recommend,
I'd like to move that motion if I could, please.
yes,
But I would like to change it slightly.
yep,
After the, for up to 3 years, I'd like to put in there somehow that it would not commence until the 23-24 financial year, which is not in this financial year, but next financial year.
so the contribution of up to $20,000 to commence at the.
For up to 3 years to commence from the beginning of 23-24 financial year, which is virtually 12 months away from where we are now.
Yeah.
The reason why I've done that is because I agree with everything that everyone said, or when they weren't supposed to, which made it a lot easier for me. I just think gives them 12 months to answer all these questions. And if you look at dot point number 2, it does say subject to council endorsement of a formal presentation and briefing. So all of this information will come to the next council, who can then make that decision. It won't affect this year's budget. Probably not what the RDA wanted, but I think it's not a bad idea. So,
And I think that that's quite sensible in terms of not impacting on this year's budget, which we only passed last week rather. I know that as a chamber, we've been saying that we can't just put, pass a budget and then just add a little bit more and a little bit more. And we are not making a decision tonight in relation to giving them any money because point 2 is subject to council endorsement of a formal presentation. So that part 2 recognises that the council needs more information. If you decide to go that way, I'm not wanting to influence your decision in any way, but I'm just making that clear to you. Does somebody want to, you've moved recommendation 2, Councillor Glasbrook, with that change? Moving that, seconding that, Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that further? Councillor Schofield, no. Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Hales?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just a question first. In relation to the $20,000 figure, I'm just wondering if there's any more information in regards to how much other councils were asked for in principle for this proposal.
My information is that all we got was that letter that's on page 99.
Yeah.
Because Karen, you did have a conversation with him?
Through the Mayor, thank you for your question. Yes, so I did have a phone call with Damien Cook and Steve Shotton, and it is a very raw proposal at this point. They were ultimately just wanting to see if it is in fact something worth exploring further and whether councils did have in principle support. The dollar value was certainly not in concrete. It was suggested it would be equal contributions as opposed to another formula, but again, I believe that there's still a lot of firming up to do in that regard.
And I think you've gotten straight to the root of my question there in regards to, I don't think it would be fair to divide the costs of such a role at the same dollar figure across the region. Simply from a representation point of view, the number of residents and ratepayers that would gain value out of it from one council to another would be vastly different. And therefore, I think, yeah, if it was a letter that was coming and asking us about the idea of the role, I would absolutely be happy to support that. But the fact that they're trying to get a financial commitment without justifying it or showing any working out of how they're calculating it and that type of thing is a concern, especially given, as Councillor Schofield outlined to the last, to the receiving and noting the report, there is lots of overlap with lots of other organisations and roles across our region that do similar work. So I think at this stage would be very hesitant based on the fact that I want to make sure that the money we spend on our regional organisations gets the best benefit, I guess, per head for our residents and our population within the City of Victor Harbor. And at this point, they would have to convince me that we are getting $20,000 worth of value out of such a proposal rather than that $20,000 going directly into local agricultural groups doing work on the ground and not overlapping with other organisations. So I think at this time, given the dollar figure is in there, I would be reluctant to support the proposal as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Just a question. If the second recommendation does not pass the chamber, what would the next step be in terms of RDA and this process?
Through the chair, I would imagine the next steps would be me suggesting that in principle support wasn't provided, unless of course there was a subsequent motion from the floor that gave greater clarity to what council could in fact support, which could also be an option for the chamber.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Ditto to everybody who's spoken. Could have said it better myself, actually. I think I prefer to see the whole box and dice of a presentation, the whole gambit of information. As stated before, we do have organisations across the state covering all this at the moment. Putting another person within the RDA area, I think it's just another level of bureaucracy, which may, again, is there any benefit to our community across the region? I wouldn't believe it would be. Not supporting this current motion due to the fact that another year, I think, they should be sent a message that, if you go to ask this type of, be prepared to come and talk to us, not to in principle support. They're just sort of feeling out whether it's worthwhile continue or not. So I think if they're really serious about this and they really want to get into it, they should have presented us with a full presentation report and the benefits that will come out to us. So even putting it out a year out is, to me, is not going to fix the problem until they're ready to come and do that. So I don't support this motion at all until they're ready to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, I think that this is sort of stepping right away from what RDA does a lot of very good work. This kind of thing is just something out in left field. If we had $20,000 to give, we could well do support some of the ongoing programs we have through through our own agribusiness reference group. So certainly won't be supporting this.
Thank you. There any further discussion? Councillor Glasbrook, do you want to close the debate?
Yeah, I will just quickly. In relation to the $20,000, well, it's in principle. It's not a. We're not saying we're going to give it to them or we're not going to give it to them. A contribution of up to $20,000. So they're just giving us a maximum figure, and it's subject to a formal presentation and briefing, which is what you want, Councillor Kemp, which the next council will look at. All they're really looking for is there a little bit of interest there or not? Yes, there's a whole heap of questions. I have the same questions. I totally agree with you. Yes, we support it. Well, no, we don't. It doesn't bother me either way, to be honest, but I support it. They can come back. I support the local farmers. They can come back. They can give us the briefing. They can tell us how much it's going to cost, and the next council will make a decision. That's the way. It's pretty simple to me, so, but whatever.
I'll put the motion to the vote now. All those in favour? And those against? Nice. I'm really unhappy with, I agree with all of the comments that have been made by everybody, and quite unhappy with just getting a letter which doesn't provide a business case, it doesn't provide details in relation to this, and also comes a week after we've done the budget, which I think is a bit tardy because people know that we're doing budgets. However, the recommendation does look at providing in principle support only. It doesn't say that we have to provide any further money, and it will, as Councillor Glasbrook said, let the RDA know that this is subject to council endorsement and that they need to do a formal presentation and business case. So I'm going to vote for this recommendation. I'm hopeful that when the RDA come and provide their presentation, so that the chamber of the day can make a decision that's based on. So I'm voting for it. That recommendation is carried. And thank you for that debate, because I think everybody brought up really important points, certainly points that I hadn't thought of when I originally read the agenda and looked at it. So it just shows the importance of good debate in the chamber. We now move to item 10.1, the Festivals Event Sponsorship Program. And I'll do the first two recommendations on block. That council receive and note the report, and that council approve the Festivals and Events Sponsorship Program guidelines and call for applicants. Would moved by Councillor Henderson, seconded by Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to them? Anyone want to speak to them? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor, this is another one of the recommendations that's come up here that I really wonder how, whether it's worth doing at this point in time. The original amount of money that we had for 22-23, 45,000, I think. We've already allocated funds to a significant amount of those funds to the Red Hot Summer Festivals, to the Victor Harbour Rotary Art Show. I thought we had also approved some in-kind support for the Viking Festival, and which all need to be costed and built in. So we're left with roughly half.
26,500. $26,500.
Yes, and so putting in place a festival and event sponsorship program, going through the process of putting out recommendations, unless there's going to be an increase in the budget, the first half of the year has been used up, so to speak, and so give the new incoming council a chance to get involved in doing this work. And to me, we just let this process lapse here, and then the new council can set up its events and sponsorship program and get some new people, perhaps.
One of the things that we're looking at, Councillor Robertson, is that once in September we go into caretaker position, we can't make these sorts of decisions or put people on festivals and programs, grants programs. We are looking at perhaps the festivals and events around Christmas time, anything that any organisations want to do around that. And so actually appointing the council member representatives for the festivals and events sponsorship program, so that they can actually get that program going before we go into caretaker mode for events that are going to be occurring later on in the year, is probably important to do.
Well, Mayor,
by November it'll be too late.
Yes, but Mayor, later on in this program, in this meeting tonight, we'll be discussing the decorations, the festival decorations. So, but to me, this is an important program. It'll be coming up in the new year, and I don't know how quickly the activities can be developed by the new council, which will be in place in December. But we've taken a lot of sort of half of the year's worth of money out of this program, I would let it lapse until the new council. So in other words, they set up the second half sponsorship and an events program for in the new year for what they'd like to do.
The release of our sponsorship program usually occurs twice a year, and so this is this is for the second half of this year, and this council is responsible for that program for the second half of this year because we are still council up until November, and the program needs to continue, but we need to make decisions about that as soon as possible before we go into caretaker mode. Does anybody else want to speak to recommendation 1 and 2? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. So what I'll do is ask if anyone wants to nominate for the Festival Sponsorship Assessment Panel. And then we will, if there's more, we need to have 1, 2, 3 nominations, and then we'll go through the same ballot exercise again. But before we do that, I'd like to appoint the acting CEO to undertake that secret ballot. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, seconding Councillor Schofield. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. So do I have any nominations? Councillor Henderson, you nominate. Councillor Schofield, you nominate. Councillor Hales nominating. Are there any other nominations? As we don't need a secret ballot. I'm not nominating because I'm going to be taking a couple of weeks leave and I may be on leave during that time. So I would like to recommendation 4 that Council appoint Councillor Henderson, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Hales to the Festival and Events Sponsorship Panel. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Mann, and seconded Councillor Littley. All those in favour? (10.2) is the 2022-23 Arts and Culture Grants Program. And I'll do this recommendation on block unless anybody has any, you'd like to do it separately, Councillor Kemp?
Yes, I would like to do number 3 separately, thank you.
Okay, so I'll do number 1 and 2 on block. If someone would like to move recommendation 1 and 2 in block. Councillor Schofield, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Henderson. Either of you want to speak to that? Anyone want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. The third recommendation is that Council grant delegation to the Arts and Culture Advisory Group to assess and award funding applications under the Arts and Culture Grant Program in accordance with the approved program guidelines as set by Council. Moving that way, Councillor Kemp?
I would like to move an alternative motion to this one.
Yep.
The Arts and Culture Advisory Group to assess the applications under the Arts and Culture Grant Program in accordance with the approved program guidelines and to make subsequent recommendations to Council.
So you're just adding to that recommendation and to make subsequent recommendations to Council?
I'm taking out the words delegation.
Councillor Grant. Okay,
So it starts from the Arts and Culture Advisory Group to assess applications under the Arts and Culture Grant Program in accordance with the approved program guidelines and to make subsequent recommendations to Council.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you, Councillor Robertson. You want to speak to that, Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. The reason why I moved that alternative motion because this will be the only advisory group we give delegation of power to expend funds. We've never done that before, and I'm not quite sure it sits within our delegation's approval to give it to an advisory group to expend funds. Only the CEO can expend funds. No other elected members or working groups or parties can do that. And I think that it sits in line with every other working group and grant funding, festival grants, one previously. It all comes back to council after recommendations. So I think we need to stick to the process as to how we do it. And this, we're stepping outside of our normal practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This, we only have allocated $10,000 for this program. And we've also, it's also been complicated hugely because it doesn't say how the funding will be allocated between 3 streams of grants. One is the Arts and Culture new grant, or new project grant stream. One is a public art grant stream, and the other is an upskilling grant scheme. And as you can see from the list of applicants for various programs we have, it's going to be huge numbers of in the end, there's going to be very small amounts of money distributed. And I think this is going to be quite a complex project. I think that the committee is going to have some trouble deciding how to allocate that funding. And I think it would be worthwhile for them to bring the decision back to the council on that.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion, Councillor Henderson?
Having sat on this advisory group, as far as I'm aware, any of this grant funding has always come back to council to be endorsed. They don't have the power to hand out this funding without endorsement from the council.
Any further discussion? I'll put it to
Yes,
Councillor
Mayor,
Kemp.
but this particular recommendation says grant delegation.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp, do you want to close the debate?
Could you just read the recommendation out again, please? Because I think there may be some confusion in the chamber.
That the council, that the Arts and Culture Advisory Group to assess and recommend awarding funding to applicants under the Arts and Culture Grant Program in accordance with the approved program guidelines as set by council and make subsequent recommendation to council for endorsement.
Thank you.
You don't want to close the debate?
I think it's self-explanatory that we keep it within our guidelines and our rules.
There's no further debate. I'll put the recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We now have the festival decorations grants program, and let's do those recommendations en bloc. Recommend 3. If someone would like to move them en bloc, thank you, Councillor Hales. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Would you like to speak to them, Councillor Hales? No, Councillor Henderson. Anybody like to speak to those recommendations en bloc? Councillor Robertson.
Yes, Mayor. As with the Arts and Culture Grants program, I think we have 10,000 available in this program, which I presume could possibly even cover the Easter period as well as Christmas. But I would wish at some stage that we have some simpler processes involved in the applications with some of these very small amounts of funding. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
There any further discussion? In that case, I'll put this to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 10.4 is the placement of a peace pole at Warland Reserve, and I'll do that recommendation en bloc unless anybody objects. If someone would like to move recommendation 1 and 2. Councillor Kemp, thank you, and Councillor Henderson seconding that. Councillor Kemp, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I think it's great that we're continuing to support the Baha community, and also the descriptive around their structural engineering and design and everything like that is really great. The fact that the council's put that in place to ensure public safety and so it doesn't fall over. But it's great to see that this process is continuing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson, do you want to speak to it? Does anybody want to speak to this? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The Corporate Systems Implementation Project update. Recommendation is receiving and noting the report. Would someone like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Littley, and seconding that. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Littley, would you like to speak to that? Councillor Robertson?
No, Mayor. No.
Does anybody want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Just more questions, I think, to Finance Manager, Ms. Kelly Knight Stacey, about the current budget to date, how much we've spent already last financial year, how much we've got this financial year, how much more money has been allocated for the following 23-24. And I'm just wondering if that could be possibly be put under budget implication item to give us the running total of how the money for each year is being expended. So we keep, looking at it. Much easier to look at than reading through a whole lot of literature, if that's possible. But just currently where we're at with our budget on this to date. Thank you.
Thank you, through the Mayor. So the report details that as at the 30th of June, there was $514,401 expended of the $805,000 500 project budget allocation for 21-22. There were some carry forwards into 22-23, and they actually go across a number of different lines. So we can look at including a table in future reports that will give a high level overview of that if you like, but it would take me a few minutes to go through the system to try and get those figures up right now. So
no, that's fine, thank you, Kelly. Just that was 514 from last financial year. We've got how much for this financial year allocated at this stage?
At this stage, through the Mayor, in terms of budget, it crosses over between capital and operating, and off the top of my head, I believe it's around $1.4 million across both operating and capital, and there wouldn't be a significant amount of that expended at this point in time, but like I said, we can include that more detail.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 12.1, the Rotary Youth Driver Awareness Program. And I can do those 3 recommendations on block. I think this is something that's quite common we do every year in relation to the Rotary Youth Driver Awareness Program, which is a great program. It's run through the council and the Rotary clubs. You want to move moving those on block, Councillor Robertson?
I just wanted to declare, as a member of the Victor Harbour Rotary Club, that I have a barely perceived interest, but nonetheless conflict of interest I'm in with. So I'll be staying in the chamber and voting on this year.
Councillor Kemp?
I want to declare a perceived conflict of interest as a member of the Encounter Bay Rotary Club, and I gain nothing out of this personally, so I'll be staying in the chamber and voting on this.
Well, I need to declare a perceived conflict of interest as a member of the Victor Harbour Rotary Club, and I'll be staying in the chamber and doing a casting vote if I need to. Councillor Hales.
Likewise, I need to declare a perceived conflict of interest as a member of the Victor Harbour Rotary Club. It's only a perceived interest as it's no great financial gain, as well as it's an interesting common with the rest of the community. I'll be remaining in the chamber and voting.
Would someone like to move the recommendation en bloc? Thank you, Councillor Littley, and seconded by, was that your Councillor Glasbrook? Tim, was that your hand up? Was that yours, Andrew?
No, I think.
Oh, so who seconded that? Carol, thank you.
Carol Schofield.
Thank you. Second by Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to this? No, does anybody want to speak to this? All those in favour? That's carried, thank you. We move to 14.1 representative reports. And the recommendation is that Council receive and note the representative reports for July. Councillor Henderson and seconded by Councillor Littley. Either of you want to speak to any of the representative reports? Does anybody want to speak to the representative reports or have any questions about any of them? In that case, all those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. 14.2, the Victor Harbour Horse Tram Authority Charter Review. The first recommendation is that we receive and note the report moved by Councillor Schofield and seconded by Councillor Hales. Do either of you want to speak to receiving and noting the report? Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. The second recommendation, as read, because it's quite a long one, relating to changes of the Charter and authorisations of the Chief Executive Officer. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And seconded by Councillor Littley. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Glasbrook.
Yeah, just briefly, I won't be supporting this. I don't think it's appropriate to change the goalposts, which is basically what this is doing in relation to the membership, just because things haven't quite worked out right. This is an ongoing change that will be ongoing. So yeah, I'm not in favour of it. I'll leave it at that.
Any further discussion? Councillor Kemp.
Yeah, I'm in a similar agreement in the sense that, when we start playing around with charters and changing things, it changes the direction of a subsidiary. And I'm not really quite sure at the moment would it be a good change in the right direction. I think if they stayed with their main charter with a couple of minor tweaks, because I still think they're in the embryo stage of development and producing and getting things happening, and I'm not quite sure whether changing the charter to a degree is going to really improve it that much, apart from taking out the beginnings of what the charter was set for in the first place. So I can't see myself supporting this at this stage.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Henderson, do you want to close the debate at all? I'll put this to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? Thank you. Councillor Schofield, cause of division. All those in favour? You're not allowed to yawn, Councillor Mann. All those in favour, Councillor Hales, Councillor Mann, Councillor Schofield, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Littley. Those against? Councillor Glasbrook, Councillor Robertson and Councillor Kemp. That motion is carried. Item 15.1 is the mayoral report, and the recommendation is that Council receive and note the mayoral report for July. Someone would like to move that way. Thank you, Councillor Hales, and seconded by Councillor Schofield. Does anyone have any questions about the mayoral report? All those in favour? There are no elected member reports. There are no matters of urgency. There are one question on notice. No, there are no questions on notice. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. There's the financial questions to do with the visitor centre. What is the total budget for the upgrade to date? And what is the expenditure year to date? And do we have a bit of a completion date, if that's possible?
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor Kemp. The total budget for the project is about 1.3 million. We have just off the top of my head, just over 300,000 to complete works this year. In terms of the completion date, we were just talking about that today. I'll need to come back to you. We're just working through that critical path, and our most critical issue at the moment is getting the access to the flow for fire water. So I will come back to you as soon as I can with an updated schedule.
And just a follow-up question, please. Yeah, the date, we don't know when yet. Is there any expected blowouts at the time? You know, example like, have we really covered off on the white ant issue within the building? Because we seem to be finding more as we start doing further renovations and upgrades. So can that 1.3 at the moment, I'm not asking you to put a hand on heart, but I know it's difficult when you're doing up an old building like this, but can we sort of be confident that the 300,000 left that you stated should cover everything for opening?
Thank you. Through the Mayor. I'd like to be confident, but no, I can't. We need to resolve the SA water. We need to resolve the water issue. And without knowing what that resolution looks like, I'm not 100% confident. We've allowed for as much as we know about the additional work still to be done, like some of the termite damage repairs, the building works itself. As far as we know, we've calculated and we have the funds for that. We do need to resolve the compliance issues. So as soon as we know that, I'll come back to you and let you know.
That's all, Councillor Kemp. Yep. Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, a couple of questions. On the Granite Island development, thank you. Granite Island development from the environment. They said in a notice that released that the kiosk or the restaurant on the island that they were giving, or they had a tenant. I think that they had a tenant for that. Do you know if there was any opportunity given to local businesses down here to bid on that, on the operation of that restaurant?
Through the Mayor, I don't know that we have that information, though we do have a meeting coming up later this week where we should be able to clarify some information.
Yeah, if we don't know, can we please ask if local businesses were given a chance to bid on that? Secondly, it seems as though Oceanic Victor has departed the Granite Island, at least. And do you know if they are still have their license to operate the floating cage or the dive with the tuna facility, and if they're coming back to do that?
Through the Chair, Likewise, we don't have that information. We've only been given the information pertaining to the kiosk and the end of that lease. So it's our intention to inquire about that later this week when we have a meeting.
On a third question on Granite Island is that is the rail horse-drawn tram rail track laying, is that project finished or not?
I believe it is. Yep.
It is finished?
It is.
Okay. On the penguins on Granite Island, have we had any feedback yet on the questions we asked the Department of Environment as to when they were going to do all the necroscopies on the dead penguins that were picked up?
Through the Mayor, we have had some information back, but it is escaping me at this point in time, Councillor Robertson. So I will have a look at what we have received and I'll be back in touch.
That would be great, because if it's possible to ask the Department of Environment, we did ask for the necroscopy reports. I believe that we should get those as a council. The penguins are vital to Granite Island and its attractiveness as a destination. We still have a slight chance to save them, and any information received, particularly because of the large number of deaths this year, would be good to know what they were dying from.
I was just saying to Acting CEO, I'm sure that I read that we have got something back, and it may have even gone out in the elected member update. I'd have to recheck mine. Can you recall, Graham?
Yeah, through the Mayor, initial responses did go back. I believe we had 2 responses, and I'm pretty sure they went back through the elected member update. And the most recent information around that thing was in the same update that Karen sent around that included the information about the cafe.
Yes.
A week and a half or so ago.
There was one there. They had sent 3 birds and they said that they didn't die of some particular disease. But I'm hoping that what they're doing in Adelaide, since they sent, I think, 1 bird to each of 3 places, Adelaide Uni, I think, and the museum and some other place, that that we get more thorough details back, better bang for the buck, public buck, in terms of that money being made available. That we need to have a better idea of what it is that caused the large number of deaths this year.
Yeah, I don't think we've got that detail, but they did. I recall, and I'll have to go back and have a look, that there some of the concerns were related to sea temperature and the lack of fish around and them having to swim further out. But it wasn't in great detail. If I can find them, I'll send the reports back through to you again, Councillor Robertson.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions without notice? No, in that case we move to motions on notice. We have a motion on notice from Councillor Kemp. And the first recommendation is that Council receive and note the motion on notice regarding the Arts and Culture Centre, Regional Community Sports and Recreation Centre and McKinley Street Multi-Deck Car Park report. Moving that way, Schofield. And seconding that, Councillor Robertson. Does anybody want to speak to that report? All those in favour of receiving the report? Those against? That's received. Councillor Kemp, your motion.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. The council temporarily ceased of any further production or work by council on the following projects: the Arts and Culture Centre, Florio Sports Precinct and the McKinley Street multi-deck car park, until a prudential report is completed for each project and to be tabled at the appropriate council meeting when completed. I did put this as a motion without notice at the last council meeting. It's now been tabled here tonight to go for further discussions.
Can I ask for a seconder first, Councillor Kemp,
Sure.
before you speak to it? Does anybody want to second Councillor Kemp's motion? Councillor Robertson, thank you. Councillor Kemp, would you like to speak to your
Yeah.
motion?
Thank you. Under section 48 of the Act, it says AA1 section, a council must obtain and consider a report that addresses the prudential issues set out in subsection 2 before the council engages in any project, whether commercial or otherwise, and including through a subsidiary or participation in joint venture, trust, partnership or other similar body. The key elements in that statement is before council engages in any project. The reason why that is done is to ensure that the council, the decision makers, covers off on all the prudential issues, which could be a viable proposition or not a viable proposition, where it could impact on the community, the operations of the centre later on, and also could have an impact on other businesses in the town. The due diligence for major capital projects in council is to ensure that in accordance with section 48 of the Local Government Act, the council acts with due care, diligence, foresight, identifies and manages risk associated with projects, makes informed decisions and is accountable for the use of public resources. Due diligence commences prior to making a decision to proceed with a major project and continues on throughout the life of the project. One of the things that we don't want to be caught into a trap that if we spend X dollars amount of money going through doing a lot of things like development applications, construction design, consent and all those, or development approval, you know, we might find ourselves spent a lot of money, maybe more money than we should have, and all of a sudden we can't pull out because we spent too much, because of the reputation of council will be tarnished because we spent all this money without having a proper documentation to make the first decision in the first place. Prudential report is up front to give you that, but you need certain requirements prior to a prudential report to be submitted. And some of those things can be feasibility studies, business cases, some design, some public consultation. There's enough information in those types of documents which, you know, will give you enough information for a prudential report to be written. We as a council must show due diligence in the conduct of a systematic review of a transaction prior to entering a transaction. With reference to the City of Victor Harbor Prudential Management Policy is a policy covering the intent of section 48 of the Act. The legislation overrides the policy irrespective of what the policy states. So we must, you know, remember that when we're looking at policies. The two threshold questions. The decision maker should make an evaluation as to the extent of due diligence that must be embarked upon before any subsequent decision is made, whether or not to proceed with the proposed project. And that's very important, we have that information. Currently at the moment, and this is the information provided by the administration on their alternative motion, if mine doesn't get up, is that under the arts and culture, we've already done concept design, we've done costings, we've done public consultation, we have done a business case that they say it may be reviewed. We don't need to go to detailed design, and it doesn't matter if it's in the long-term financial plan or not, because to have a prudential report. The prudential report will make reference to the long-term financial plan and the asset management plan, but we have enough data there to go ahead with the arts and culture. It's noted in there in the business case that, detailed design, there is compliance issue around $300,000, I believe, for compliance of the cinema, but also in that is also a development application for the arts and culture. We don't need a DA to have a prudential report. So I think compliance issues need to be addressed, but certainly not that part of it. So we can actually go to a prudential report now on the arts and culture. Regional Community Sports and Rec Precinct, we have concept design.
You have 1 minute, Councillor Kemp.
We have a concept design, we have costings, we have consultation. We haven't done a business case. We don't need to do detailed design at the moment because all you need is a concept designs. We have a feasibility study that really shows the costings of that precinct, and we have designs already and so much information already there to do a prudential report. And as for McKinley Street car park, we have a concept designs, we've had costings, We've done public consultation. We haven't done a business case, but we've done 2 expressions of interest, which shows a high level of costings and how that would operate. So those 3 projects can go ahead now with a prudential report without doing anything else to it. No development applications and nothing at all. So I believe that's where we're at, and that's where we should actually start going. Enact those prudential reports this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Robertson, do you want to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I think the bottom line on this this part of the legislation is that this is best practice to do a prudential report, and these particular projects have been well and truly developed up before. If we take into account, we've had 2 cracks at the Sports and Rec program site. One both by Treadwell, where we were talking about $40-odd million worth of costs. Now we're down to a more realistic level of how much it's going to cost. But of course, none of these projects have touched on the issue, except for the Arts and Culture Centre, on the issue of the operating costs of these facilities. And we know that the Arts and Culture Centre, for instance, is going to have a very large amount of operating costs associated with it. Whether that's affordable, I went back over some of the reports today for the that Randall's gave us, and it's, you know, at present what we've got there is going to, for a town of 10,000 people, is going to be, you know, a touch and go proposition, a prudential report, which was in the previous iteration of the Arts and Culture Centre back in 2018. Council actually passed a motion in the middle of 2018 to have a prudential report done on the then design of the Arts and Culture Centre. It didn't, I can't find any documents as to why it wasn't completed, but it wasn't done. So to me, given the status of the uncertainty of where we stand in terms of the economics, in terms of whether there's grant money likely to be available, and so on, it's good practice, it's best practice for us to put in train the on these very large projects before we get knee deep into them, that there is a prudential report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Littley.
Yeah, I'm most likely going to support a motion in this 19.1, maybe even this motion. As I'm sure we're all aware around this chamber, and we have been for a long time, that prudential reports for these projects are going to be required when it is time. It's my understanding that we haven't reached that time at present. This is based on the fact that if we had, or indeed if we had passed that time, we would have received a tap on the shoulder to advise us that we had actually failed in our duties under the Local Government Act. Am I going to be concerned if I support this motion and it fails to get across the line? No, because I have faith in this council following due process. I am, though, more likely to give this motion my support with the removal of the Fleurieu Sports Precinct from the motion. Given that it is mandated that a prudential report be done for this project at a set time, I feel on this project we should be moving forward in step with the schedule or timing of a prudential report needing to be done as per the requirements of the Act. My reasoning for this sits with my strong feeling that this facility is an integral part of our future, or of the future for our town, and will have incredible value for not only our very broad sporting organisations that will use it, but also has a very real potential to provide valuable community space and services, including possibly reducing the need for other large investments on major projects that are in this same conversation. I feel we have discussed this enough, and we need to hook into this project, meeting our legal obligations as we will do.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Councillor Henderson.
I won't be supporting this motion because I think it shows a lack of understanding of when in the process a prudential report is required. I believe we are getting close to that point with the Arts and Culture Centre, but not close at all with the other two projects. So I'll not be supporting this motion because it's not logical.
Thank you. Councillor Hales, did you want to speak?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. While I certainly agree with most of the sentiment that Councillor Lilly just put across, in that the car park, the Arts and Culture Centre, they're years out, like 5 years plus out, and therefore it wouldn't be such an issue around those two projects being paused at this exact stage. The Community Sport and Rec Precinct needs to progress and we need to keep working on it. And unlike Councillor Kemp has said, the concept design is, the draft is not yet completed. So saying that there is a concept design is not entirely the truth. There are ideas around it at this stage, but has council agreed on an exact design of the facility and what should and shouldn't be included? No. And as recent as I'm pretty sure the last meeting, we were still talking about whether ideas should be pursued or not. You can't do a prudential report if you don't know what's in a facility. So it's just ridiculous to think that work needs to be stopped for a prudential report to be done on that item. I also fall back on the fact that we passed a budget last week and the budget was set as it was set. We voted for it. If we had issues or concerns at that point in time, those issues and concerns should have been dealt with at that point in time. We've allocated budgets for these things, and if we supported it then, to then not support it a week later is also a tad ridiculous. Yeah, I'm happy to further the conversation around the Arts and Culture Centre and the car park, but absolutely not around the Community Sport and Recreation Precinct. So I won't be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Do I have any further debate? Councillor Glassbrook.
Just for the record, I'm going to say the same thing. I certainly agree with the intent of Councillor Kemp, and I would like to support this motion because it would be wonderful for the next incoming council to have these prudential reports and realise that we can't afford them. And so I do believe, as two people have already mentioned, that we should be ceasing the Arts and Cultural Centre and that we should be ceasing the multi-deck car park, in particular the multi-deck car park, because that's been pushed out, and I don't know how even that got put through, but anyway, I'll leave that alone. But I do also strongly support the community sporting facility. I don't really want to stop the work on that. I don't know if Councillor Kemp would be interested in removing that one from his motion, because I'm sure it would probably get up then. In actual fact, I could move a motion to amend, or should I move a motion to amend it, or should I ask the mover and second if they'd like to change the motion, vary the motion?
You can do that, although it seems to take away the, Councillor Kemp, from what I'm hearing, is saying that a prudential report is needed for all of these things, and then you take one out because you want it to continue but not the others. It seems a bit strange to me.
Well, he's saying that work would cease. That's the part that I think that we're gagging on.
If we're saying a prudential report is absolutely required, then a prudential report is required for all of those.
Well, it is required, but he's suggesting that we cease work on all of these three projects until the prudential report is done. Whereas I would like to cease work on number 1 and number 3, but continue with the Sport and Recs Centre. And which it says in the alternative, which the next stage is to get a
that would be a different
prudential
motion.
Report.
That would be a different motion. You could move a formal amendment.
I'll just leave it.
Is there any further discussion, Councillor Mann? Councillor Schofield? Councillor Kemp, would you like to close the debate?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins, and thank you, members of the chamber for your input, and I hear what you're saying. The tap on the shoulder is this motion. That's where it's come from. It's to wake us up. I don't think it was being looked at seriously. It is logical because that's what the Act says we should be doing. So it is a logical process that we should be doing. The ceasing of the work is an interesting comment because if there is some information required by the author of the Prudential report, they will seek that and say we want this done or that done. So work will still continue, but we need to start the process of the Prudential report and not wait. So I think the guidance will become from whoever the author is of the Prudential report will say this is what's missing or not required. So I'll accept that position of the author, but as long as we started the process and we're moving towards in the right direction. So I think
I've just got a query, Councillor Kemp, on what you said. I'm not sure that I understand. If I don't understand, other people might not understand. The motion is to temporarily cease any further production, but you just said that you don't need to cease work if the work's necessary in carrying out the Prudential report. So I don't understand.
Right, I'll explain.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The ceasing of the work is done through the Prudential process if they require further information. But ceasing of the work in the context without the Prudential report commencing is things like stop doing development applications, doing construction designs, or whatever other processes that council will work on and put resources into. We don't need to do that until we get that. To give you an idea, our last Prudential report was done by this council was the Aquatic Centre. The business case was done in 2013. The concept designs and the concept was done in 2012-13. Prudential report was done between 13 and 14 prior to the 2014 elections, where the new council came in 2014 and had to vote. But they only got the Prudential report about 3 or 4 weeks prior to their voting in the December council meeting from my research. So if that's what the process was done back then why aren't we following that same process today? Because that's the standard that we set, and that's what Section 48 of the Act talks about. It's not going to stop this process happening. It's not going to stop the building construction in the timelines that we want. I'm not against these three concepts and these ideas. I do support all three of them, but I think we need to follow proper process and due process and show due diligence by this chamber before we spend too much more money on other aspects of these three projects before we get the proper information. And that proper information is the Prudential report shows the operating costs and ongoing costs and the impacts on the community as well as the capital build as well. But so from that point of view, that's why I think we need to look at the Prudential report, get it started. The author of the Prudential report will tell us what is more required, if it's required. So I still believe there's enough information there to get the Prudential report done quickly, prioritise it any way you want to, do the sports precinct first, and get that up and running, the Prudential report, and then you can finish off and get everything happening in the same timelines for this financial year. Thank you.
Thank you. That closes the debate. All those in favour and those against? That motion's lost. Thank you. Can I have a... Those in favour, Councillor Glasbrook, Councillor Robertson and Councillor Kemp. And those against, Councillor Hales, Councillor Mann, Councillor Schofield, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Littley. That motion is lost.
I'd like to move a motion.
Councillor Littley.
I'd like to move a motion that is written up there as the alternative recommendation as proposed by administration.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Schofield. Would you like to speak to that motion, Councillor Littley?
I will do. I'm moving this motion because just hearing in the closing statements from Councillor Kemp that he'd like to follow due process, and I believe that this motion at number 3, which is proposed by administration, does solidify that due process in that it is pointing out with no uncertain terms that prudential reports will be done on each of these 3 projects when the timing is satisfactory or right. So that's my purpose for moving this motion at the conclusion of the failed motion as it went through.
Thank you, Councillor Littley. Councillor Schofield, did you want to speak to this motion?
I agree with Councillor Littley, but also Councillor Hales in the fact that they're in the budget. If there was any issues, then it should have been raised over the last 4 or 5 months when we've had the opportunity to raise them, not after the event.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Does anybody else want to speak to the motion? Councillor Robertson and then Councillor Mann.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The second proposal delivered by the administration is, to me, one that's trying to weave a halfway house between, what's required under the legislation, what's best practice, and trying to keep works going. We have in that, I think that, well, we'll see what happens, because I think that these are big projects that are coming up, particularly the sports centre and the arts and culture centre, and we'll see. Some of the people that are busy voting each way on this sort of thing and not putting them in the right order that they are following best practice. Yeah, well, we'll see what happens with that, but I won't be voting for it because I don't think it really addresses the issue we've swept under the carpet for a number of years. We don't do enough of this prudential reporting or prudential type reporting, and people think that, okay, it's just only there for $4 million plus projects. It's the sort of process we should be following in smaller projects as well. And well, when we don't get it right, then we pay for it. And we've seen that with a number of projects that we've had over the term of this council. So I won't be supporting it, but yeah, good luck with the each way bit.
Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I was just going to quickly say that I'm usually not in favour of voting for motions that just state what we already do / going to continue to do. But if this is necessary for some members, then I'm happy to support this one. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Does anybody else want to speak to this motion? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. This motion, it certainly goes a long way from my previous motion, but to me it's gone too far. And yes, why didn't we think about this 4 or 5 months ago? Yes, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but the beauty of it all is that, it is a tap on the shoulder. As we mentioned tonight, there's a reminder of it. Why wasn't it done before? That's a question, may not be answered. But one of the things I found when I was in the corporate world, you get approval of budget. It doesn't mean approval of expenditure. Because it's in the budget, it doesn't mean we have to be expended. There are reasons why budgets do get stopped and don't get expended. So using that argument along the lines, because it's in the budget, we have to spend it. No, we don't have to spend our budget. We spend what we have to do the job we need to do for our community. So, and that's where, staff are always saying it's fantastic they do this and they look at it. They're always trying to find efficiencies and find savings. Yeah, but the chamber seems to want to spend. So even though this motion is I support it in the context of what I tried to achieve in my motion, but to me it's too much, too far, without the proper due process in place. So I won't be supporting it.
If no one else wants to speak to the motion, I'll ask Councillor Littley to close the debate.
Yeah, well, as I said, I'm moving this because it does, link into the due process. It's something that we do. So, Councillor Mann, I'm hopeful that you will support it, because I know that you don't support things that we would do anyway. And only other comment is there's an authority to give us a tap on the shoulder, and if Councillor Kemp wants to claim that he's that authority, good luck to him.
Thank you. I now put the motion to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you.
I'll call a division.
Thank you, Councillor Lidley. Yep. Councillor Lidley's called a division. All those in favour? Councillor Hales? Councillor Mann? Councillor Schofield? Councillor Henderson and Councillor Lidley. And those against? Councillor Glasbrook, Councillor Robertson and Councillor Kemp. That motion has carried. I think that was good debate, but I think we also need to remember that the staff are the experts in the area. They have done prudential reports before. They will continue to do prudential reports when necessary. As elected members, while we can ask them questions, it's really important that we do know what we are talking about and we get the proper advice. It is 8 o'clock, so we will have a 10-minute break and come back at 8:30. And when we do, sorry, at 8:10, not 8:30. And when we do come back, we'll be getting into the confidential aspects of the report of the agenda and going into confidence for the last 3 items. Oh. at 8:10, 8:09. We come to item 20, which is motions without notice, and I have got a motion without notice from Councillor Henderson. And the motion is that administration staff investigate a lowering of the road speed limit along Seagull Avenue to 40 or 30 kilometres per hour in order to address safety concerns of some residents. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Henderson?
No, thank you, Mayor. I think it speaks for itself.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Littley, do you want to speak to that?
Oh, only to say that I've had, I think we all have received communication from residents of Seagull Avenue, plus I've spoken to a number of residents in passing there, and I've recently had the opportunity to spend some time up there when it's been heavy with traffic and busy with kids going around, and I think that the idea of at least investigating what a lowering of the speed limit will do is worthwhile doing, and it might address some of those concerns. It might not meet everyone's expectations, but it's worthwhile having a look at.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Glasbrook.
Just a question. We need to talk with Alexandrina. Isn't it half of Seagull Avenue in Alexandrina? So we'd need to probably talk to them first, would be my opinion.
That would be part of the investigation. Councillor Kemp.
Thanks, Mayor Jenkins. This motion, I see the merits in it, but it lacks detail. What is the investigation? And I've thought motions without notice where it could be a budget cost, which we haven't done, which is also staff time we don't accept, and put it to motion on notice with more details and some costings to it. So you talk about investigation. What is this investigation? How big is it? How far does it go? Public consultation, get the people's views of whether they want the speed limit lowered in their area, etc., etc. It goes on. So I think we need to defer this to a motion on notice until we get some more information around what an investigation entails and the costs.
It's my decision to accept it as a motion without notice. Councillor Kemp, if there are budget implications in relation to an investigation that need to be brought back to the chamber, then the staff will do that. But there are no budget implications in relation to investigating this, or no major budget implications in relation to investigating this. Are there any further queries? Councillor Hales.
Just a question, I guess, to follow up Councillor Kemp's statement in regards to what would be estimated if we did instigate the review of the speed limit on that road and end up changing the speed limit. What would the total cost be around?
Through the Mayor, I'm not sure that I can answer the total cost. It depends if we actually do anything, and it also depends if we could, in terms of the investigation, split that with Alexandrina. So if we needed to do a traffic management study, that would cost us a few $1,000s. If we did consultation, obviously there's staff time involved, and then if we needed to do any, obviously be liaison then with DIT, even though it's our road. So, and then the implementation of any on-ground work. So depending on the outcome, what the cost would be.
My understanding, there has been a traffic study done of Seagull Avenue in relation to traffic.
Through the Mayor, there was a traffic count done,
yeah.
Partial traffic count, and some elements of a traffic study done, but not a traffic management study to look at the best outcome.
Okay, so that is considerably more than I imagined when Councillor Henderson put that forward. Councillor Henderson, would you be prepared to put this as a motion on notice for the next council meeting, and then get some more detail from the staff in relation to the costs of the investigation? I didn't imagine that an investigation would be including a traffic management study, because I thought we already had that information there.
I would be happy to do that. The reason I brought it tonight as a motion without notice was that I didn't want to put any more of a workload onto our administrative staff at this point in time. So I wanted to leave it fairly open so that when the staffing resources after sickness, hopefully after sickness, are looking better, then the administration could work on this. I didn't want to put extra work pressure on them right now at this point in time, which is why I brought it tonight as it sits.
I think we may need to put some costs towards that. So if you could bring it back. So you'd need to formally withdraw it and bring it back as a motion on notice. And perhaps if you talk to Director Hayter prior to bringing it back as a motion on notice, she'll be able to give you some costs around what some of that investigation would be.
Yes, I'm happy to do that.
Yep.
I'll withdraw this and I'll bring it back to the next meeting, August.
Thank you. And I do apologise, Councillor Kemp, you're right in terms of the costing of that. I didn't realise that there would be significant costs involved. So thank you very much for your advice earlier on as well. Councillor Glasbrook.
Can I just suggest that perhaps Councillor Henderson would like to make a very simple motion that this administration discuss it with Alexandrina Council would be in my opinion, would be the very first step, and then could take it from there, because if they're not interested, I really don't see the point in progressing. It's mainly their street.
Do you need a motion for that, or could you do it?
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor Glasbrook. We know Alexandrina Council is currently looking at their Encounter Bikeway, so Seagull Avenue is part of their consideration. So although they haven't specifically mentioned any traffic or speed assessments they've done there, I can just ask them that anyway and come back to you with more information about that. So I can follow up with Alexandrina.
Councillor Robertson.
Yeah, I guess the motion's going to be withdrawn for tonight, but even then, for the next council meeting, I've been pleased this kind of activity that's being proposed, especially for Director Hayter's group of people. We have a massive program of getting this enterprise resource program in place, and this is more oxygen being sucked out of that process, and because it takes a lot to do those little what appear to be tiny jobs, but they take up a lot of time and effort. We ought to be getting focused away from this sort of thing. I appreciate the basis for the proposal, but is it the right sort of thing to be doing this financial year? I don't think so.
So we'll get a chance to vote on that. Councillor Henderson brings it back to the next meeting and has a discussion with Director Hayter in the meantime. And I would like to say, you're completely right, Councillor Robertson. The staff at the moment are very short-staffed. COVID and staff shortages are leaving really big gaps, particularly with Kathy's team. And I'd like to commend them for doing a great job through some really difficult times. If you can pass that on to your team, that would be great. So you're withdrawing that motion, Councillor Henderson. Thank you, Councillor Littley. We now move on to confidential items. And the first item is the Local Government Association mandatory standards feedback. And the first recommendation is going into confidence relation to that. And this is specifically being asked by the Local Government Association. And they say that the disclosure would divulge information that is provided on a confidential basis by the Local Government Association. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Littley. And seconding that, Councillor Henderson. Do you want to speak to that? Anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Robertson?
Yes, Mayor, I see that it's a Local Government Association trying to, put things into confidence. I don't think there's anything in here that warrants that particular proposal. On page 239 in the commentary, the very first line is, It says here, the LGA is seeking feedback from member councils on the revised draft training standards for council members. I would have thought that would have been something that at least a few members of our community would be interested in having a say. We are just representatives of the community, and the LGA is saying that should only come from the elected members. The community should be given the chance to report on this, because the next thing out of this process is going to be that all of a sudden there'll be, it'll be de facto, it'll be whatever it is. And there'll be no chance for the community to say, yeah, in addition to that, we'd like to have this training provided to elected members, but they're not going to get any opportunity. I think we should be able to push back to the LGA and say, there's nothing secret in here. The minister will do whatever he wants to do, whether he approves it or not, but give your communities a chance to give some feedback.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Is there any further discussion, Councillor Schofield?
Yes, look, I think this is very important. And the thing is, once we actually start say things out into the public arena, whether it's just a thought or something that we're going to debate, quite often it's taken as gospel. And so I think in some cases when we're doing some planning or looking at this, we need to be very concise in what we're doing, so that when it does get out into the public arena, they know that it is something that the council's discussed, and then there can be some feedback. But when you're trying to plan something, it doesn't really help if people are assuming something when that's really not the objective. And I look at some of this, I know the Landscape Board, and I'd like to see that sort of training coming through, where there are modules that each individual member needs to go online and fill those modules out, and you get a rating on what your capacity is in understanding the organisation in which you're going to work and represent the public in.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Are there any further comments? Councillor Lidley, do you want to close the debate?
Only to say that I think that the reasoning is fairly clear and the request is fairly clear from the Local Government Association, and can we vote on it?
That closes the debate. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Lance. And thank you for those people that are listening online. Look forward to talking to you next month.